Greetings, beloveds, and welcome to Unity of Tempe online from our home. I have lost track of how many weeks we've been doing it from home right now, but I am so glad you are choosing to join us and watch us online. Blessings, love, and peace from my heart to yours. Now, if we were in person, we would have an opening song. And this morning we have a wonderful song from our beloved musical director, Zephyrin Conte. I invite you to listen to it and sing along with it, and I will be back right after the song. Wasn't that a wonderful song? Open to the power. Yes, let us open to the power. Now, last week we celebrated a pivotal holy day. People around the world participated from home and felt the message of resurrection and rising up. And despite COVID, millions came together separately from their own homes to rejoice in the story of Easter. The feeling of upliftment was palpable and so incredibly needed. People around the world enjoyed watching Easter online services, and then they probably spent the day enjoying special foods and celebrating and honoring the sacred day. Then came Monday, and perhaps you felt exhausted. I know, I was exhausted. I know Ron was even more exhausted than me. And our musical director, Zephyrin, she shared with me that she was completely spent. She was drained. And as I checked in with other people on instant messaging and social media, I saw that many of my friends around the world were completely and utterly tired and exhausted. So many of us had put so much into making this Easter in the time of COVID, a memorable and a special one. We had put our hearts and souls into it, whether we were giving a message, doing music, or whether we were watching from home. We wanted to honor and celebrate this special day. And it was essential for us to do that. It nurtured and it soothed our battered spirits. Then on Monday, Easter Sunday had come and gone, and it was no more. Easter 2020 had passed us by to divert us from COVID, and many of us were just plain tired. Now, can you imagine how tired, exhausted, and defeated and upset and devastated the disciples must have been after the death of the man they had been following? But then what happened? Jesus began making appearances in magnificent, omnipresent ways. They saw him here, they saw him there, they saw him everywhere. Well, maybe not everywhere, but before the day of Pentecost, which occurs 50 days after Easter Sunday, Jesus makes at least 10 different appearances to his disciples and to others who believed in him. Those are the key words right there, beloveds. Those who believed in him, those are the ones to whom he showed up. Now, last week I talked about a couple of Jesus sightings that happened that first Easter Sunday. First of all, there was Mary Magdalene at the tomb. She saw Jesus outside in the garden, but at first didn't recognize him. Remember, she thought he was the gardener. It wasn't until he called her name that he recognized her. And later that evening, 2 of his followers were traveling from Jerusalem to Emmaus. That's a small village not very far from Jerusalem. And Jesus joined them on the road as they traveled, but they didn't recognize him. In fact, it wasn't until they invited him to stay with them for the evening and share a meal with him, and that he took bread, blessed it, and broke it, that they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. And you may recall that I said about that it is a metaphor for us at this time, that during what we are going through right now, we can allow it to break us or break us open anew, and that we can rise up afresh. So after Jesus disappears, because after they see him and he breaks bread with them, he disappears. So what do these 2 do? Well, what would you do if you'd just seen this miraculous sighting? You'd probably get on the phone, or you'd probably text, or you'd probably Skype or FaceTime with your nearest and dearest, and you'd be so excited to tell them. Well, because they didn't have FaceTime or Zoom or text or Insta or any of those things, the disciples high-footed it immediately that very evening back to Jerusalem, because they wanted to let the others know what they had seen. And when they get there, what do they discover? Well, the other disciples and other followers are in lockdown. They have shut themselves together in a locked room. Now, why have they gathered in a locked room? Well, because they are fearful. They are very fearful that the authorities will come after them. Their leader, their master, their Lord was just crucified, and they are terrified that they'll be next, just because they had association with Jesus. So what do? They lock themselves inside, and who can blame them? In a way, their being locked inside speaks kind of to the times that we're in, where we are hunkered down inside, staying safe, keeping ourselves and others safe, not going out much at all, probably like they weren't going out much at all. And so we can relate to that in a strange way right now. The disciples and the followers wanted to stay safe, just as we want to stay safe and keep others safe. So the two who saw Jesus arrive back in Jerusalem, where the others are in self-appointed lockdown, and they probably, to get in, knew a secret knock. I don't know what it was. They probably had something pre-arranged that they would be allowed to be let in. They arrived and they were excited. And Luke chapter 24 verse 35 tells us that they told about the things that had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. Then, in the midst of this mind-boggling news that they have seen the risen Jesus, what happens? Well, Luke 24:36 tells us, while they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." And how do they respond? Well, they're terrified. They're frightened out of their wits. They think that they're seeing a ghost, a spirit. They don't recognize what they're really seeing, the Christ presence before them. It has never ever appeared to them in this way before. This is the first time, and they are terrified. And what does Jesus respond to all of this? He says, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your mind?" So let's take a deeper look at all of this. Jesus appears to them at a time of great fear. They're afraid they're going to be persecuted, perhaps even put to death. And fear is clouding their thinking, just like fear clouds our thinking. When we're full of fear, we can't see literally the forest for the trees because fear rises up in us, and all we can think about is that fear. And even though Jesus had told the disciples that he would be put to death and that he would rise 3 days after, they were confused. They were grief-stricken. Peter, in fact, well, he was feeling an enormous amount of guilt. He had betrayed Jesus 3 times, saying, "I didn't know you, I never was with you, I've never seen the man." He was feeling an incredible amount of remorse. So when Jesus rises from the dead and materializes before them, they are stunned and they are terrified. And what does Jesus do to reassure them? What are his very, very first words to them? "Peace be with you." His first words are not about himself. They're not about the ordeal he's been through. They're not about the pain. They're not about the torture. They're not about blaming the leaders who put him to death. No, his first words aren't about himself at all. With his very first words, he demonstrates the epitome of who he was, who he is, and what he came to be and demonstrate. Peace. Peace was his mission on earth. He was the Prince of Peace after all. And he proclaimed and lived it with every breath. And so he shows up again in service to humanity, in service to the disciples and his followers, and says these words, "Peace be with you." Now, some services, some churches always say this on Sundays. They say peace with you, or they say different variations of peace be with you. They may say the peace of the Lord be with you and also with you. It is a form of greeting one to another. And I love that. And when I was preparing for this message, and wondering, what am I going to speak about on Sunday? As I do, all week I pray and meditate, and this didn't come really until later in the week. This idea of peace be with you was so much on my heart. So I invite you to say that with me now, beloveds. Peace be with you. And if you're with someone else watching this, please say it to them. Peace be with you. Ron, peace be with you. Peace be with you, my beloved Ron. And now let us say it out to the world as a blessing. Peace be with you to our entire world. Now, the risen Jesus, with this statement, encourages us to be with the Christ presence that abides in each of us. When the presence is dominant in our consciousness, our mind becomes peaceful, and worry and stress diminish. Now, I want to be clear about something, beloveds, when I speak of peace, because peace does not mean the absence of sadness or grief or denying troubles or challenges. It doesn't mean nothing ever upsetting happens. It doesn't even mean not ever getting angry or not ever allowing our emotions and our feelings to show. It does not mean any of that, because it would be kind of just irresponsible and unkind and unfeeling for us to go around going, I'm so peaceful, nothing affects me whatsoever. That is not who we are called to be on this planet, beloveds. But peace does mean that in the messiness of life, even in the midst of COVID, we can go deep within our hearts to the abiding awareness of the presence of God's peace in us. Now, when you are fearful, imagine the Christ standing before you saying, peace be with you. Oh, what a beautiful image. Peace be with you, beloved. Go to this sanctuary of peace and allow your soul to be nurtured in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. Now let's jump back again to where Jesus asks the disciples, why are you troubled? And why do doubts arise in your minds? We already discussed how they were fearful and skeptical of what they were seeing. To convince them further, Jesus appeals to their senses. He invites them to see and feel his hands, see the holes, see his feet, and see the piercing on his side. And he is convincing them that he is indeed flesh and bone, that he is there. Jesus, feel, touch, see, I am real. Then he appeals to their senses again, asking a rather, in fact, not just a rather, a very odd question. Do you have any food here? Wait, what? The risen Jesus is asking for a sandwich? What? What is he doing? Why is he asking to eat something? This is, what? But why would he ask for food? Again, to convince the disciples that he was truly here with them now, he needed to perform an activity that they'd seen him do many, many times before. They'd participated in meals with him, and so he wanted them to see him eat. And this helped convince them that he was actually there with them, not an illusion, but flesh and blood. He was there with them, spirit made flesh, sitting with them, breaking bread once again. After all, this experience of the risen Jesus in physical form, who could appear and disappear and go through locked and unlocked doors and just show up and be unrecognizable, this was something new to add to his repertoire of miracles. And his followers had never had an experience of the Christ presence like this before. Now, I don't know about you, but I always feel that the disciple Thomas gets rather a bad rap. After all, he was not with them at this first time that Jesus appears to them in this room. He was absent. I don't know why he was absent, but he was absent. And when his friends and disciples and the other followers come and tell him, "Oh my goodness, Thomas, guess what? We saw Jesus. He was here in front of us. We saw him." What does Thomas do? He wants more proof. He doesn't take it. He thinks, well, maybe these guys are really overwhelmed by grief and they're having a group hallucination. I don't know. Maybe they're so sad that they drank a little too much wine and they got tipsy. He doesn't know. What he says is that he will not believe unless he gets to see him himself, Jesus, and put his finger in the holes of his hands and feet and into his side. He makes such a definitive statement. I will not believe unless I see. But before we give Thomas too bad of a rap, let's admit to ourselves that at times aren't we all a little like Thomas? At times our doubts and our fears are bigger than our faith. We can be so skeptical. God, really? Are you really in the midst of this COVID that is going on right now? Are you really here? God, are you really with me always? Am I truly abiding in the I am presence always? Will COVID ever go away? Will there be a vaccine that works for everyone? Really? Will I have enough money to make my bills? We want solid proof at times, don't we? So, what happens for Thomas? Well, 8 days later, he's with the disciples in the same room, and Jesus again materializes. And what are the first words that Jesus says again? Well, you know it, because we said it, right? Peace be with you. Then, what does he say to Thomas? He says, put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. Then Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. I love that so much. Stop doubting and believe. Would you say that with me? Stop doubting and believe. And again, stop doubting and believe. And again, stop doubting and believe. Oh my goodness, couldn't that be a mantra for us? Stop doubting and believe. Stop doubting and believe. Stop doubting and believe. I believe. I believe. We can move ourselves into that space of knowing. I believe. I believe with my whole heart. You know, whatever it is we're wanting to have belief about this is the key right here. It's the key of all of our unity teachings in so many ways, to believe it. Wayne Dyer, what did he used to say? He used to say, I'll see it when I believe it. I'll see it when I believe it. But so many of us, we get caught up in, well, I'll believe it when I see it. No, it's I'll see it when I believe it. Because belief is the basis of faith. Now, beloveds, what in these troubling times do you need to believe? I know, I really do know that it can be difficult to believe that this pandemic will pass, but it will. In God's divine timing, this will pass. It will be over at some point. I don't know when that will be, but it will pass. And we will go back to a life similar to that we knew before. I don't know that it will be exactly the same, but I am affirming and believing that it will be better for all sentient beings on our planet. This is a time of pause, and it is also an opportunity for us to grow in our faith in these troubling times. May we not just find faith in troubling times, may we grow in faith in a deeper way than ever before. And so, beloveds, would you pray with me now? Mother, Father God, may our faith be revitalized as we become consciously centered in the truth that God is always with us. May the word peace echo in our minds and hearts. May we allow time each day to invite the gift of God's peace to dwell within us. And as we allow our souls to be filled with peace, may we send it in prayer to those close to us and all around the world. Peace be with you, world. May peace be with all those on the front lines of COVID. May peace be with all those who are ill and in hospitals and in ventilators. May peace be with all the doctors and the nurses. May peace be with each person who is grieving, each person, each worker, each person who is helping in this time of COVID, truck drivers and every single person that you can imagine who is helping. Peace around the world. Peace be to every single sentient earthling. And so it is. So, beloveds, it's time for us to share our financial blessings with our Unity of Tempe spiritual community. Thank you, thank you, thank you for graciously continuing to support us in staying open and paying expenses. And we'll have our beautiful tithing song from Zephyrin, and then I'll be back right after that.
Blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give, all that I receive. Sing along, it'll lift your spirit. Divine love through blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give, and all that I receive. Because when we give, we receive. When we receive, we are giving. Sing it with me like a prayer, because we know when we give, we receive. When we receive, we are giving. Divine love. Stay safe.
And so, beloveds, as we close out this service today, I invite you to say the prayer of protection with me. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. All is well, and we are grateful. I love you, each and every one watching. I love you whether I know you in person or whether you're just watching, just happen to tune in. Blessings, peace, and joy. May peace be with you.
Bye-bye.